Hey, with your evening story channel, I post new interesting stories every day. Subscribe and click the bell to not miss it. Molly put away her sewing and went out into the hallway, and when she heard the door lock click, she glanced at her watch to see her husband, who was late again after work. Mason made a guilty face, shrugged, and then kissed her cheek. "I've been waiting." "Well, I'm sorry, honey, I had things to do." "Mason, what business could there be at a time like this?" In a tired voice, Molly asked. "Molly, you know I'm not a full-time employee. My boss asked me to stay late today. So I stayed. By the way, I'm the only one here. My paycheck's coming. The boss promised me a bonus. Believe me, I can count on it. Unlike the others." "Why was your phone off? I don't get it." Mason flared up. "Is this an interrogation?" "No, of course not. But I have a right to know what you're doing and when you're coming home. After all, I'm cooking dinner and waiting for you." "Oh, by the way, what are we having for dinner tonight? Pea soup." Mason grumbled unhappily. "Molly, don't you think it's too much? Maybe you could make something else." "Mason, open our shelves in the refrigerator. It's completely empty. I told you the day before yesterday we needed to get groceries." "Well, I'm sorry, I don't have the money for that right now." "Well, if that's the case, then we'll have soup without any whimsy. Charles, by the way, has already eaten and is asleep. I made him porridge. Even the baby realizes that I can't offer him anything else right now. Charles is only a year and a half old. He hasn't learned to be cranky yet. But believe me, soon he'll tell you where he saw you with your pea soup." "Why do you say that, Mason?" Molly burst into flames. "Is it my fault? Charles is still a baby, so I can't go to work right now." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. Mason walked over and hugged his wife. "Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just really tired of work and poverty and all this." Mason picked up several pairs of socks that were lying on the chair. "Molly has just sewed them up. I want us to have lots of money, but I don't know what to do to make it happen." "Okay, wipe your tears and let's go. I'll have your pea soup. I hope there's some breadcrumbs to go with it." "I do." Through her tears, Molly said and followed her husband into the kitchen. A week went by. One day Molly, walking with Charles through the city, met her friend Lisa. She was very happy to see her and asked her to chat about something. "Well, show me the ring." "What ring?" "Come on. I saw Mason at the mall jewelry store buying you a gift. I just didn't get a good look at it. Come on, show it off. You're so lucky to have a husband. All you can expect from mine is a bunch of flowers." Stunned, Molly didn't know what to say. Then she spoke with numb lips. "I left it at home so I wouldn't lose it. Mason got the wrong size. It's too big for me." "Oh yes, Molly," Lisa exclaimed. "Have you lost so much weight? Just a shadow. You can't do that. Although if it's no secret, share your diet. I've gained 10 pounds and I can't get rid of them." Diet talk. Molly machine, not realizing what she was saying. But then she pulled herself together. "I'm sorry, Lisa, I'm going to go. It was nice to see you." Lisa looked at her resentfully and shook her head. "She's weird and doesn't want to talk." So what? Molly walked on, thinking of one thing. Who would Mason buy a gold ring for? And where would he get that kind of money? The family was living on the edge of starvation. Charles has outgrown all his clothes. We have to buy him something new. And there's no money. The child allowance paid by the state wasn't enough for anything. Utility bills were mounting every month, and Mason was buying gold rings. But when Molly asked him yesterday about his paycheck and promised bonus, he said he hadn't received anything yet. Molly called her husband. "Mason, do you have a minute? We need to talk." "No, I'm busy right now. We'll talk tonight." Mason couldn't handle Molly. "I know about the ring, who he bought it for, and with what money. Can't you see the position you're in? Why don't you say something?" "I said we'll talk at home." Mason cut him off and disconnected the call. All day Molly was not herself. When evening came, Mason came home and for the first time in a long time, she didn't come out to greet him. "Molly." He came up to her, took her hand. "What are you thinking? You're getting yourself all worked up. Have I ever given you reason to doubt me? I did buy the ring, but it was at the chief's request. It was his girlfriend's birthday, and to avoid embarrassing his wife, he asked me to buy her a present. And as it happens, it wasn't him who got screwed, it was me." "It's funny," really, Molly said through her tears, but she felt her heart drop. "Here's the promised bonus," said Mason, holding out the money to his wife. "Let's go shopping tomorrow. Buy whatever you want. Come on, darling. Smile." Molly did smile at her husband. "And if you only knew how scared I was, if you only knew." 2 months went by. One day Mason told Molly that he had to go to the region on business. "Is something wrong?" "No, I'm just getting you a surprise, and you'll find out what it is later. Hopefully a nice one." "Sure, you bet." A couple days later, Mason left and disappeared. Molly spent a lot of time trying to find out where he was. She went to the police, went to the lineup a few times, came back looking like herself. But Mason just disappeared into thin air like he never existed. Oh my God, something terrible had happened to him. Molly cried, holding her son close to her. "What are we going to do now, baby?" "What do we do now?" Charles, not knowing why he was crying. Mama covered her face with the palms of her hands and looked into her eyes. "Oh, son," sighed the unhappy woman. "When will our daddy come back?" Time was running out to survive. Molly sold everything she had that was even a little valuable for nothing. Sold the TV, microwave, and even the washing machine. In the end, she was left with only the bare necessities of furniture and appliances. Footsteps rumbled in her empty apartment. Molly began to get hired cleaning the entryways of nearby houses. At this time, Charles stayed home alone. She put him to bed and cleaned up for those who paid her to do so. Sometimes, when Molly returned, she would find her son crying. More often, he would sit silently or lie on the bed, cradling his favorite teddy bear. Several years had passed. What had Molly been through in that time? Molly knew only she and God. But the woman never gave up hope that one day everything would be all right. It cost her a lot of labor to get her son into kindergarten. But when she succeeded, it became easier with part-time jobs. But still, it was difficult to live in a small town. There was little work, paid for it little, and Molly decided to leave with her son to the regional center. The move did not take long. All the small family's possessions fit into one bag in Charles' backpack. Strangely enough, they were lucky. Molly managed to find a small apartment on the outskirts of the city without any problems to move Charles to the kindergarten, and find a job as a cleaner at a cleaning company. A couple months later, Molly accidentally learned from her partner that a very rich house needed a housekeeper. "You know," Clara said, "don't even try to get a job there. The landlady's such a bitch, no one ever stays there. And you know, I was told by a friend who worked there for 2 months, and then quit because it was unbearable. Anyway," she said, "the landlady wasn't looking for a housekeeper, but a real maid. The old woman picks on every little thing." "Why an old woman?" "The owner of the house is an old woman." "No, I don't mean that. She's about 55, but she's so mean. God forbid I'll try. She pays very well after all. Come on, but I'm warning you, she's a tough customer. She'll take your soul out, you'll run away." "But why am I telling you this?" "You'll see for yourself soon enough." The next day, Molly stood in front of a full, well-groomed lady with a haughty face and listened to everything that concerned her duties. "Anyway, listen to me. My name is Nancy. Don't expect to be able to bum around for nothing while getting paid. I will pay you well, but I will not allow you to be lazy or fake it." Molly listened to the speech carefully, then nodded to her new mistress. "Okay, I get it. I hope you won't have any reason to complain about my work. I wouldn't dream of it. The servants in my house are not easy." Molly worked diligently, and no matter how much Nancy watched and nagged, was forced to admit that the new maid was doing a fine job with what she was assigned. A week or two later, the mistress called her maid in and made arrangements for a celebratory dinner on Saturday. My husband is coming with our business partners. They'll be staying with us for a while. I want all of you to put on a show of excellence. I see, and I want everything done discreetly. Then, when the time comes, I'll gather you all together and introduce you to my husband. You're almost all new here. He's been living abroad for the last 6 months. And believe me, my husband knows very well what servants should be like. The silent men nodded to the stern and demanding Nancy. Everyone realized that they would have to work even harder than before. Saturday came. Everything in the house was ready to receive guests. In the evening, Nancy gathered all the servants in the living room. Molly fixed her uniform. She came out and was stunned. In front of her stood Mason. She couldn't defend herself. It was undoubtedly her husband. She read it in his eyes full of terror. Mason looked just fine. He'd gotten better, cooler, and more confident. Stylish clothes emphasized his new status. Nancy didn't notice their confusion and hugged her husband and said that this was Mason and his orders should be obeyed clearly and unconditionally. I hope I don't have to say this twice in an arrogant manner, the hostess said. If Mason needs anything, he will always have a bell at hand. And if you need anything, be kind enough to tell me, and I'll take care of it myself. Now go to your seats, dear. Now Nancy turned to Mason. Come with me. I've missed you so much. And then we'll go downstairs and have dinner with our guests. Molly heard those words as she left, and as soon as she closed the door behind her, she laughed nervously. And then her lips quivered and tears showed in her eyes. Shameless. He left her and her son to fend for themselves. And he himself had settled down quite well with Nancy, but she was almost twice his age. To calm down a little, she picked up the waste bucket and went out the back door. Molly tossed the trash out. Then she walked over to the tall birch tree, wrapped her arms around its trunk, and let the tears flow. Is it worth killing yourself like this? A voice came from behind the fence. Molly, sobbing, saw that from the neighboring garden, the gardener was looking at her. A man about 35 years old. What could have happened to upset you like that? The stranger was silent for a moment, then asked warily, I hope everyone is alive and well. Molly wiped her tears and smiled at him, but answered nothing and went to her room. But he limped and walked through his station, trying to keep up with Molly. Girl, you didn't answer. I'll be worried. I have a weak heart, he said jokingly. And what's your name? I'm David. Can I say David for you? Molly stopped. Molly is my name. Just Molly. Don't worry, it's okay. I'm just nervous. Well, it happens. They talked some more. And then Molly went to her room, but she was barely in the hallway when Mason stepped toward her and grabbed her arm. Were you spying on me? Were you following me on purpose? Yeah, and I just came here so I wouldn't screw up my life. You're not going to get away with this. Get out of here and don't come back here again. Did I forget to ask you? Nancy pays me well, and in case you remember, I feed our son. You left us with nothing. You bastard, you traitor. Do you know what I've been through? You bastard. You didn't even ask me how he was or where he was. You didn't ask me to show him to you. I hate you for all this. I hate you. Shut up, don't yell. Otherwise, someone might hear us. And don't mess with me, or you'll be sorry. Mason grabbed her hand, but Molly pulled it away and rubbed her wrist. Don't you dare touch me, she hissed like a cat. And then she left. Now, Molly went to work like hard labor. Nancy, listening to Mason complain about her, nagged her about every little thing and threatened to fire her. And she didn't do it only because Molly was still very good at her job. Mason himself constantly insulted and humiliated Molly in front of his new wife. And only short, rare meetings with the gardener of the neighbors, David comforted the unhappy woman for his literacy, which he had since childhood. David was shy of women, so he was unmarried. You know, I like working in the garden. I love plants, and they reciprocate. Soon the apples will be ripe, and I'll be sure to treat you, and you'll realize that I'm not exaggerating. Thank you, David. You're a very good man. You make me feel like I'm breathing clean air. That's what it smells like in my garden, the man smiled back. David, for some reason, Molly immediately trusted him. He called her Molly. He sympathized and advised her to leave Nancy. But she explained that according to the contract, she had to work 2 more months, which, however, now stretched like a year. Everything goes through contracts now. If I quit, Nancy won't pay me anything. Molly sighed. You know that. You probably got a job too. Just like everybody else. Okay, David, I'm gonna go or she'll be back soon. And then you and I are gonna be in a lot of trouble. One day, Mason saw Molly talking to David, and it was like he went crazy. You've got your lover all messed up and you're having an affair in front of me. You're getting back at me. If I see you again, you're out of here. What did you do to me? Molly flared up. What right do you have to tell me who I can date? To her surprise, Mason grabbed her and started kissing her. You're my wife. I'm not giving you up to anyone. Molly broke free and slapped him in the face. You disgust me. Go to your old beauty and kiss her, but don't you dare touch me. In 2 months, I'll be out of here and I'll be gone. Molly, I love you. You remember how good we used to be, don't you? Screw the bastard. Molly cut him off and left. Half an hour later, she heard Mason's affectionate voice. He was thanking Nancy for the new car she had given him that morning. One day, Molly, as usual, brought Charles to the kindergarten early in the morning and was horrified to see a notice that said that due to an emergency repair of some pipes, it was closed for a week. There was nothing to do. I had to take my son with me. Good thing Mason had gone somewhere and wouldn't see his son. Molly sat down in front of the baby. Charles, you're a very smart and obedient boy. Please, I'm begging you. Behave yourself. Our mistress is very strict and will yell at me if she sees you disturbing everyone. I bought a picture book for you. You'll find a quiet place and look at them quietly. I'll feed you later. Charles nodded and Molly calmed down. But just as she was about to begin her duties, she heard her landlady screaming. Molly ran into the living room and saw that Charles had climbed with his feet on the white sofa. He was snuggled up with a book in his hands. Now he was looking curiously at the strange aunt who was squealing like a piglet. What is it? Who is this? Molly barely coaxed the landlady, explaining that she simply had nowhere to put the baby. And it's just one day, and tomorrow she'll figure something out. And if I ever see him here again, you'll regret it. Understandably. Furious, Nancy left and Molly turned to her son and saw that he was not around again. The woman splashed her hands and rushed to look for him. Charles was already in the garden. He was standing next to David and was telling him something, and the gardener was laughing and joking with him. Charles, what is it? I'm in trouble with him. She apologized to David and then told him why she had brought him here today. I'm sorry, David, are we interrupting you? Look, why don't we just let him come to me? I'll do the flower beds, he can play with me. And then we'll figure it out. There's a swing here in the garden. Well, Charles, will you come and visit me? The boy nodded happily. David, but it's inconvenient and your host might get angry. No, they're kind. Not like yours. Go on. Take him outside. I'll meet you there. Outside, Molly, in an outburst of gratitude, hugged and kissed David. And he took the baby, embarrassed, and hurried away. Molly went to her room too, and then she saw Mason, who was staring at her. He had just arrived at the house and had just seen his ex-wife kissing him. He rushed after her to pester her again with accusations. Molly fled into the house, but he followed her, threatening and pleading at the same time. And when I tried to hug him, I heard Nancy screaming behind me. Mason, Nancy's favorite. She's the one who's always hinting at something. I told you to fire her. Oh, you bitch, Nancy screamed. So Mason clammed up, Molly said in a calm voice, taking off her apron and throwing it on the table. I'm not trashy, I'm his legal wife, and we're not divorced. The child you saw, our son Mason, left me. With him. And he left here for the city. And I didn't know he was living with you now. And now I'm leaving and you stay and be happy. Molly, she heard Nancy yelling at Mason in the living room and him making excuses. But that was of no interest to her. She was following her son. Molly peeked over the neighbor's fence but saw no one. Then she pushed open the gate and timidly walked down the driveway, looking for David and Charles. They were sitting on the veranda. David was drinking tea and Charles was eating some pastries with milk. When he saw his mother, he waved at her and ran to the swing. David was surprised when Molly stopped. "You can't do that. If she sees you, come to us." David came up to meet her. "I owe you something." He suddenly stepped towards her, hugged her and kissed her, but not like she had kissed him at the gate, but really long and tenderly. "This is my home, Molly. I am the master here, and I've been seeing you and waiting for you for a long time. Stay with me, Molly. I love you and I want you to be my wife, and Charles will be my son. Maybe not just Charles. There are two Swains." Molly sighed and pressed her cheek against David's shoulder. "I love you too, David. You're the only person in this life who's ever felt sorry for me." She lifted her head and smiled. It's not nice to cheat. And the new kiss was not interrupted even by the screams of the neighbors. Nancy kicked Madison out and slammed the gate behind him.